Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
I'm Egbert, the owner of this station. Check out my website at egbert.com. That's E-G-G-B-U-R-T, egbert.com. Now it's back to Brad and John. Check out their website at bjshow.co. The BJ Show? Come on, guys. Anyway, here's B and J.
John, got a little bit tease here. Okay, a couple things I want to talk about before we get into what we said we're going to talk about, okay?
Okay.
I saw this article the other day, and I thought to myself, this California thing is just getting crazy. Let me see if I can find the story again. I thought I had it here in front of me, but, I have things organized, but then I don't. Essentially, the California lawmakers passed the bill that made it to the point where you have to pay $20 an hour for restaurant help, okay?
Oh, yeah. What could possibly go wrong?
Okay, you ready for this?
I'm ready.
In certain parts of California, they've now passed a law that if you're a delivery driver like Uber Eats or any of those kind of things, $26.97 an hour.
That seems reasonable. And that the cost is never going to be passed along to the consumer. The corporation will definitely eat that cost.
Well, but see, the interesting part of this is that in California, a lot of the restaurants that did delivery had their own delivery drivers, specifically some of the pizza places and stuff like that. The first thing they dropped was they got rid of their delivery guys because they're going we'll just move this over to Uber Eats and that kind of thing. Well, now it's to the point where it's like, okay. See, now, first off, I will be honest with you, except for having pizza delivered, and I haven't had a pizza delivered, I don't know, in years. I always go pick it up. I have never used Uber Eats or any of the other different, delivery services.
Yeah,
DoorDash.
I don't know why you would. I mean, you would have to be certainly lazy, or you would have to be charging. I think a lot of people would, maybe some people do it personally, but I might do it charging it to the company, because who cares about the company costs, right? Like, nobody's going to check that. But why else would you have Uber Eats delivered?
Well, I'm a single guy, and probably 90 to 95% of the meals I eat by myself. That shows you what an exciting person I am, okay? So if I'm going to order, a Big Mac meal from McDonald's, and you can get the Big Mac meal, for $6 now because of the Cardinals thing, isn't that going to cost me like $20 to have it delivered? I mean, isn't it? I don't even know.
The delivery cost would be way more than the food cost would
right.
be, for sure.
And I'm going okay, there's a McDonald's. McDonald's is sort of like Walgreens. Although if you heard that story, that Walgreens is going to close 25% of their stores. Did you hear that thing?
I know that they're closing a lot, and I know they're closing one in St. Louis City, and Corey Bush is not happy.
Well, they said, part of the problem is they say they're competing with Amazon, but part of the problem is it's to the point where, let's be honest, it's like in St. Charles County, you can stand in the parking lot of one Walgreens and you can look to the north and see another Walgreens. You can look to the south 100%. And see another Walgreens and go okay, are we a little bit overbuilt? You know what I mean? It's to the point where, are there too many, Walgreens out here? Okay, that was the one. Okay, the other topic was that I want to talk about. Where was it here? I'm not organized this morning. What the hell's wrong with me? Okay, this is a story, a very sad story that happened yesterday. And I bring this up because of the fact that I have not one but two friends who essentially are clinical social workers. The one lady that I know has a master's degree, and I believe the other person that I know that does this has a PhD. Not an EDD like Joe Biden, but a PhD. It's a bizarre story, and I got this on Channel 5 News yesterday. It starts, the headline is, Officer Shoots at Woman as She Fatally Shot Herself. Okay.
I saw this headline, Brad. Please explain how this happened.
It is so bizarre. It starts out as a call for domestic disturbance. And once again, talk to police. They say the most dangerous calls they go on are domestic abuse calls, domestic disturbance calls, because they have no idea what the hell's going to happen. All hell can break loose, and sometimes it does, and this one happened, okay? So a guy is having a little bit of a disturbance with his girlfriend. So she pulls out a gun, and according to the story, she pulls out a gun. They're in their house. She pulls out a gun. He grabs the gun away from her and sits on the gun, literally sat on the pistol.
That's a good idea.
And then he told the woman to calm down. But what did she do? She grabbed his pistol from his waistband. Okay, so in other words, we're talking about, a true NRA family where, where he's got a pistol, she's got a pistol, everybody's got a pistol. So he's sitting on her pistol. She grabs his pistol from his waistband and she starts shooting at him. And it says that as the boyfriend drove away, which time the woman shot at the moving car. And guess what? One of the bullets struck a home across the street. And the resident called police. Okay, this is obviously in the city, okay?
Now, I was going to ask, is this in Ladue or Frontenac?
I was just going to say, this was not in Ladue. This was in the city, okay? So SAC, who is the spokesman per, says, when officers arrived on the scene along with crisis response team members. Now, once again, that's an important part of this story. When officers arrived on the scene along with crisis response team members, the officers told the woman to put the gun down. When she quickly raised the gun, the officer fired one shot at her, which said occurred, quote, almost simultaneously with the woman fatally shooting herself in the head. So in other words, they roll up on her. She's got a gun. They're trying to talk her down. She picks up the gun rapidly. The officers already have their guns, at the ready, because of the fact that they don't know what the hell's going to happen. And once again, this is a domestic disturbance call, and already she's bullets flying in the neighborhood, hit the neighbor's house, and the whole bit. And so as she picks up the gun, they think she's going to shoot at them. No, she's shooting herself in the head. Now, the interesting thing was the officer fired one shot, but apparently missed because they said she only had one gunshot wound. But they say they're going to continue. They said, with a quote, they said they did not see any evidence of additional gunshot wounds, but they will continue to investigate. The woman was in her 50s. No one else was injured. The officer will undergo a psychological evaluation in accordance with department policy. Now, here we go again. The critical sentence is, SAC said when officers arrived on the scene along with crisis response team members. Now, once again, this person shall remain nameless. I text one of my friends who I have this discussion with all the time, and interestingly enough, this is sort of what she does every day of her life, where, she does this kind of stuff. She runs an organization, and she deals with I don't want to go too far. I'll probably nail her and nail to the point where people know exactly what I'm talking about. But the interesting thing was, this is what she sent me. Let me just read this. She said, I said, she says, the behavior specialist is also trained in police tactics. They're a member of the police force, not a private behavioral health organization. And I replied back, I was texting back and forth. I said, do they have a badge and a gun? No, their main priority is to help with de-escalation tactics and to make referral to the appropriate services. Okay, John, would you take this job where you're showing up at domestic, disturbance calls? You got no gun, you got no badge. You're going to use your verbal skills to talk these people down. How much would they have to pay you to do that job?
First of all, we don't need no stinking badges. Secondly, you couldn't pay me enough to do that. But I think for people for whom their job is not a paycheck and is more of a calling, I could see people wanting to do that. I could see people wanting to be there and go home at the end of the day and be like, hey, I saved a life today.
But see, the interesting part of this is that the whole thing, the Cory Bushes of the world are saying, we've got too many police, we need more, therapists, social workers.
Cognitive behavioral therapists.
Right. And to the point where, once again, I had this awakening experience when I started. I think I started a week after I turned 18. I was a fresh high school graduate. I graduated from high school. I was 17. I turned 18 a month after I graduated from high school. And 2 weeks after that, I'm working for a police department as dispatcher, going through my training and the whole bit. Okay, our department was a relatively safe department. Not a lot of crazy crap going on, but we had our share of crazy crap. And I dealt with dispatchers and police officers and sheriffs, and this was in Illinois, and troopers, or actually they didn't call them troopers in Illinois. They were highway patrol. They're actually state police. And it's interesting. Don't ever call any of the highway patrol guys in Missouri, don't ever call them state police. They get their feathers get ruffled by that. They'll say,
okay.
I'm not state police. I'm highway patrol, because their mission is different. in Illinois, and this is true in a lot of states, the state police literally can go into communities and make arrests, whereas in the state of Missouri, that's not their job. Their job essentially is to, chase down people going 100 miles an hour and 44, that kind of stuff. Okay, so essentially, I can't imagine anybody wanting, and not only that, 9 times out of 10, because they claim, the Corey Bushes of the world claim that when the police show up, they're there just to bust heads, which is not true. You know what I mean? Most cops, 98% of the cops, they want to go home. They don't want any, they don't want any busted knuckles. They don't want any abrasions or bruises or broken limbs. They just want to do their job, put the bad guys in jail where they need to be put, and go home and watch TV. Get what I'm saying?
I get it. I mean, if you can beat up an SIU professor on a prestigious campus, all the better. But other than that, just do your job and go home.
John. Okay. So, do you want to talk about the debate now?
Yeah, sure. I watched I had it on for probably 3/4 of it, so I didn't see everything, but I saw enough.
Okay. What you missed, I watched
and
this.
Did you go to that 97.1 party, or
you know
did you
what?
skip it?
I did not, because of the fact that...
Okay, so you had a pass that somebody else would have loved to have used?
Well...
Somebody who would have made use of it, and you chose to waste it.
I heard them talking about it on the air this morning, that apparently it got to the point where, from what they were saying, was... They were making comments about, we sure hope the Maryland Heights police weren't there to check occupancy. So apparently they pretty much let everybody in. But I had second thoughts about it because, I put Shelley on the air yesterday. And this is one of the things I told her when she first started working with me. She says, why don't we show up at other people's, other radio stations' events? I go, no, I don't do that. We don't, that's sort of respect to them. Well, I don't want to crash their events. If anything, I want to help them. That's my modus operandi, whatever you want to call it, in the radio business. I want my competition to do well, because my competition does well. That means I'll do well, but they don't.
Yeah, but how would you have attending an event and saying hi to a few friends undermine their event?
I don't know. It just was.
It wouldn't have, Brad. It sounds like it's an excuse to not go.
No.
There would have been a group of people there who would know you and say, "Hey, Brad, good to see you here. Do you still have a radio station?"
Yeah. Are you still?
It's not like you would have been going around handing out your card and advertising propaganda.
Well, I was going to do that. That's part of the reason why I didn't go.
Anyway, go ahead. I didn't mean to get you off track. I think you should have gone, but I don't get to make that decision.
Okay, so I watched it. As I do most things, I don't have a TV set. Isn't that amazing? Everybody's got a TV. You got a big screen. You got a big screen at your house, John?
I have a moderate screen, I would say, and I didn't even have a TV until a couple years ago.
I have a big screen TV that somebody gave me, which doesn't work. That's why they gave it to me, and it's in my one room, and I use it sort of as a prop. It doesn't even have it's not plugged in or anything like that. Okay, so I watched.
They said, "Here, you throw this away, Brad."
Yeah, right. I watched, because it was going to cost them $10 to take it, take it to have it thrown away, so they give it to me. Okay, so I watched it on CNN, and afterwards, OMG, if you get a chance, it's got to be out there on the internet somewhere. Watch the after debate review. You would not believe what happened
from CNN.
Oh my God! They've got.
I've seen it, and I've seen who's the white-haired guy that kind of looks like a heterosexual Anderson Cooper.
I think that's John King is his name.
Okay, yeah. He was where he eviscerated Biden.
He starts off but there was no holds barred. They're just essentially, the words disaster, kept coming up.
Yeah.
And Van Jones, who was the dude who, at one point, he was almost crying. And he talked about Joe Biden's my friend, and I couldn't I had to look away. I couldn't stand to see what was going on. And they're essentially saying, and there are a couple of them were holding up their phones saying my phone kept blowing up. All my Democratic friends were texting me going, my God, I can't believe what's happening. And I'm just like, man, I have never, you and I being, you were very much involved with the media when you were with Monsanto because you dealt with media people. That was your job. You were like the liaison between the company and the newspapers and the all the other different media reporters and journalists and stuff like that. Okay, we all know that CNN is in the bag for the Dems, and they love Trump, or no, they hate Trump. They love Biden. They think Kamala Harris walks on water. Last night, to me, was one of these moments in media history which I will never forget, because it was like somebody flipped a switch and all of a sudden these people went, and all of a sudden they came out and they were honest. And a couple people even mentioned the fact that, because there were like 10 people on this panel, and a couple people, one of them was David Axelrod, and there were a couple former, Trump people there. The one gal, her name, she's got 3 names, Sarah something or other. She used to be some kind of a person in the Trump organization. Now she hates Trump. And they were all talking about how this was tough to watch. It was horrors, it was terrible, it was horrendous. But yet what they were also doing was they were saying, well, Trump was terrible too. Now, once again, the interesting thing was, I thought that, and here I'm going to give a compliment to CNN, I thought that Jake Tapper and Dana Batch, what she calls herself. Yeah. I thought they did a great job, and I thought this thing back and forth with the microphones off, and you got 2 minutes, you got a rebuttal. I thought that went extremely well. And let me interrupt real quick. So Jason Rosenbaum had an interesting point on Twitter /X, and he said, excuse me, that the moderators were letting candidates not answer questions. I think Jason's right. And at a semicolon there, I know that the CNN folks obviously practice this a lot, the moderators. And you think of how many weeks they've practiced their approach to this, Brad, and thought, okay, we're, for the most part, it's like, Brad, you were an umpire for many years. And like a good soccer referee will do, let them play. Right. So you're not going to call a little push, a little shove, let them play. And I feel like that's what the moderators did. How many times did Trump ask a question and then he went back and spent most of his time talking about the previous question? And instead of inserting themselves, to your point, Brad, instead of inserting themselves as main characters into the debate, Happer and Bash, for the most part, just let them play. Well, but then they would come back on them, and a couple times they didn't use their entire 2 minutes, and they would say, okay, there's still 42 seconds left. Let me ask the question again, and they would reiterate the question. I agree with you 100%. Matter of fact, it's interesting because I read this story that talked about, if you go back in history of debates, that when these debates first started getting televised, the moderators only had 10% of the total time of the debate. And they said in the last few debates, the moderators have between 20 and 25% of the time, whereas the moderators became the stars, and they were the ones that were. And
so annoying.
And just like me with it, like, okay, and I'm going to say this right now. I listen to a lot of radio. I listen to music radio. I listen to a lot of talk radio. One of the things that drives me nuts, and I'll give you the guy's name right now, and you'd think he would do a better job than this, is Clay Travis. Okay, a good interviewer asks the question and gets the hell out of the way. But like Clay would do this thing like, if I'm interviewing you, hey, John, tell me what it was like when you were a person that worked for Monsanto. And, tell me about all the different chemicals you were involved with. And where did you go? Where did you travel around the world? And what did you eat when you were in Bangkok, Thailand? And was your office a big office at Monsanto headquarters? And where did you go on Olive? Did you go to the McDonald's right there, 270? Once again,
I did exactly, Brad. Now, you and I have both praised Stone Cold Steve Austin, my buddy, my phone buddy from a previous story. But I used to listen to his podcast, and I stopped listening to his podcast because he would ask a question, hey, what was it like working down there in the USWA? Because when I was down there, we used to wrestle on Tuesday nights, and then on Wednesday we'd go, so what was it like working there? Because to me, it's like ask the question and zip your lip.
Right, and get the hell out of the way. And see, the interesting thing about it is that was one of the things that Howard Stern, not anymore, but Howard Stern did a good job on. He'd ask these questions and shut up. I mean, I can still remember when he used to have Trump on the air. This is when Howard Stern, before he went to satellite, when he'd have Trump on the air as a regular guest, and he would ask him questions like, I still never forget Howard Stern one day told the story, asked Trump, he says, okay, I don't know what wife this was, Marla Maples or something like that. And I don't know if you remember the story. He was married to this gal, and the gal had an affair with the head of security, the Trump, in other words, the guy that was in
the Trump. Yeah, I heard about this. Yep.
Right. And he asked him a couple questions like, oh, how did you feel about a guy that you were paying that was, blunk, blunk, blankety, blankety, blunk with your wife?
Yeah,
and Stern would come out and Trump would say something, and then Stern would just, well, come on, tell me how you really felt. And I remember Donald Trump saying, I'm going to make that guy's life miserable for the rest of his life. I'm going to continually sue him. I'm going to hire an attorney who's going to do nothing but just sue him and sue him and sue him. And I'm going like, whoa, listen to this, because Stern wouldn't let it go. He kept probing and probing and probing, and finally got to the point where he drew out Trump to essentially, give this tirade about the fact he's going to sue this guy into the next century. And I'm going like, whoa.
Yeah, and let's not forget that was a pre-vaccine Howard Stern.
Right.
And now that he's vaccinated, Brad, he's not only is he inoculated against the disease for nearly 14 seconds at a time, but he won't ask those same type of questions.
Well, and he works 1 day a week or something like that. Once again, I say it's like my complaint with Guy Phillips and all these other, well, I'm only working Monday through Thursday. Okay, well then, go get a job at one of the school districts is only teaching 4 days a week. Radio, there's two aspects of radio. There's Monday through Friday, and then there's the weekends. If you can't work 5 days in a row, then retire, go stick your feet in the water somewhere, in the sand somewhere, and move aside and let somebody else take over that job. Okay? Can you tell
I don't know. You act like he doesn't still host DB's Delight, Brad.
I'm sorry. Well, the original one was Bobby Day, who I work with, who was one of the most amazing disc jockeys in the world. Okay, we have to move on. We're way late. It's all damn fault of John Combest. It's
you know
all
how
his
John
fault.
gets.
Okay, well, I'll tell my story of who I talked to yesterday, but I can't reveal who I talked to, okay?
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?